This is not your everyday podcast. Real conversations, real stories.
We have an inspiring guest today, Jeremy J.R. Robinson. JR brings unique energy to the field of law, as a way of saying it. From his journey as an ambitious young lawyer to one of the most recognized lawyers today, he has a powerful story of resilience, ambition, and success. Jeremy, welcome to Innovators.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Good to finally have you, man. So if we just start off, first off, kind of let our audience know who you are, what you do, and then we'll kind of go through it.
Yeah, so they call me Attorney JR. Jeremy Robinson's my full name. Funny story about why I've been called JR. I had a Marine Corps friend whose first name was Jeremy, so anytime they yelled out Jeremy, we both were like, hey. So I took on the nickname JR, which made it a little bit easier. But in reality, JR kind of protects Jeremy. Kind of learned that through therapy, which I'm glad we'll get a chance to talk about. But I'm a personal injury attorney. I'm originally from New Orleans. Believe it or not, I've only been practicing personal injury law for the last 4 years. And, I came in by storm, I'd like to think. But prior to personal injury, I did criminal defense primarily and father's rights family law, which really kind of prepared me for a much easier way of practicing law on the personal injury side. But it also gave me the blueprint of trial and dealing with people and emotions and protecting as always. So retired combat Marine, went to Iraq in 2005. And for me, serving and helping people has always really been my thing, I think. So that's me in a nutshell.
I love it. We were just talking about before the camera started rolling. I've known JR for a while. We both went to John Marshall Law. And I was talking about you really are the embodiment of this podcast. And something that drives me crazy, and a huge reason why I do this podcast, is there's kind of two main things that are taught nowadays, at least in my opinion, to be successful in this life, at least financially. And it's one, do these things. I know the way, wake up, meditate at 4 a.m. and buy my course. Or it's, you gotta be born into it. You gotta be, your parents are silver spoon, and you come from a very different path than that.
Oh, definitely come from a different path.
So kind of walk us through like what your early life was and kind of how you got on this path.
Absolutely. Well, most people say their father was a Rolling Stone. Well, my mother was a Rolling Stone. She was a beautiful burlesque dancer. My mother's family is originally from Michigan. Go figure. Typical Boston oriented by way of Ireland is what I'm told. But I wasn't raised around them. I grew up in New Orleans. My mother went from burlesque dancer to stripper to heroin addict. And so didn't have a father around, and I kind of just ran the streets. And where I grew up, I was, now I was use this in a positive way, but I was a minority within the minority. So growing up as the only white kid in the Callio projects in New Orleans. That's right, look that up. Murder capital of the world, Master P and all that good stuff. Yep, that's where I grew up. But by age 16, Nick, I had my elevator speech, 2 gold teeth, 2 felonies. I got my GED in juvenile jail. And so growing up in New Orleans was really kind of a struggle to identify, who am I? It was that identity struggle because father was never around. My mother worked at nighttime, so I was, they called us the latchkey kids, right? Yeah, so I pretty much had freedom to do whatever I wanted to do, but I didn't have very many role models, so I kind of learned the hard way. Always knew I was smart, always felt a certain level of intellect. I could skip school, come back, miss the whole semester, take the final exam, and still get a D and pass. Which means I must have gotten a C or a B on the final exam, and then I didn't fail.
C's make degrees.
Yeah, so I knew that there was a certain level of smarts. I think I was just learning about street smarts and how to be mentally tough. And so that kind of paved the way for, where I am now.
There's a mindset of that, though. Like when you grow up in that underprivileged kind of lifestyle, people tend to kind of thrive in that and kind of learn to kind of cut corners and figure out the easiest way and the fastest way to do things. I mean, we've had prior guests on that, where they dealt drugs and they did things like that. What do you think kind of made you want to leave that potential path that a lot of your peers may have been going down?
Sure. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Growing up in New Orleans, early 90s, selling crack cocaine was our thing. And, you hope to hustle up enough money to get a new outfit and some new shoes for the week, go to the club, meet a girl, and have fun. But I think that hustle mentality is what makes someone mentally tough, and they always find a way to win. I think I was prepared to talk about the will to win, the perseverance, the resilience to win. I think early on, when you don't have much, the sky's the limit. When you've seen the bottom and you come from the bottom, it's like, what else am I going to lose? And I think that's another reason why when you speak on poverty-filled backgrounds of people who made it, I'm sure they can resonate with the fact that if I just do this, I'll be successful. Wait, you mean I did this and I can keep going? Now it's like, oh, wow. So to your point, a certain level of resilience holds true, and you always have that humble memory of where you came from and where you don't want to go back to. So I think my success is derived in swimming and never sinking, being put in situations where I'm always with odds stacked against me. Joined the Marine Corps, and here I am, this young, frail, skinny kid with 2 gold teeth, and everybody's laughing at me. Who is this guy?
You posted social media 2 pictures of you.
I did.
Around that age.
Yeah.
And we want to put them up here.
That's fine. Feel free. But
yeah.
So going in the Marine Corps, my odds are already stacked against me because I don't look like the prototype Marine. I'm not, bodybuilder. I'm not
close.
I'm nowhere close to like being a physical specimen, but my mental toughness, my ability to survive, my resilience that somehow God would relay to me. If I could just make it through the next day, I'll find a way to win. And so that's kind of carried with me.
Do you think the Marine Corps helped you kind of push out of that lesser mindset that maybe, you couldn't thrive, or that was your only life, was maybe meeting somebody at a club or something like that? Because it's true.
No, yeah.
And I remember that. I grew up in rural, Oklahoma, running homeless shelters.
Sure.
It's my dad, when my parents divorced when I was 11, he moved out and I was raised my mom exclusively. So I have a similar background, less, dealing with the projects and things like that, but I was surrounded by poverty and I remember walking around homeless shelters and everybody's drug addled, but as a kid, I'm like, well, everybody's just tired, right? Sure. They're homeless. Right. They don't have a bed, I excused it. Sure. There's nothing, they weren't suffering, maybe they were just tired.
You knew something wasn't right.
Right. I assumed they were just tired,
Yeah.
And so I think the biggest difference is that as someone who's well educated, we now know that there are limitations that people deal with. There are hurdles, there are difficulties, but I think the difference between those who make it and those don't, or somebody who goes, yeah, I understand it's not fair. I don't have the same advantages as everyone else, but I'm going to, that be damned, I'm going to make it work. So why do you think you kind of push through that and persevere? And education, seeking education, a lot of people don't value that in those communities.
It's a great question, because I think everybody has that moment in life where they're like, aha, yeah, I this is the pathway I'm going. I'm committed to it. I don't see any other way. I remember being in LTI, Louisiana Technical Institute. I was 16. I was in jail for 2 felonies. It was armed robbery, and one was possession of narcotics with intent to distribute. And I remember sitting there thinking, this isn't my life. This can't be my life. God, what's going on? And, I don't pretend to be a Bible thumper, but faith has always been something that's guided me. And so whenever I'm in a very difficult place, I always just pray. And I think in that moment, I realized if I don't make a change now, this is what I have to look forward to in my lifetime. And so in that moment, it kind of clicked. Next thing you know, I'm taking my GED test in which is essentially a jail for juveniles. And I scored some of the highest scores in the entire building for the last several years. It was kind of like okay, God, I hear you talking to me. What are you going to do? So I think I never took the woe is me path, because I've always been driven. I've always just been like, all right, what's next? What else am I going to tackle? All right, that's not my path. That's probably not who I want to be, some drug dealing, blue-eyed, slick guy. I don't want that life. I think my life is created for more. And so I think it's that little voice in my head through my dreams, through my prayers, that just kind of pushed me along the way. And then from there, got out of juvenile jail, went to work at Applebee's almost like 60, 80 hours a week.
I was an Olive Garden boy, yeah.
You know, so you're working, and that
Jersey
time we're not getting paid much. We're gonna make, you know, if we're lucky, we'll take home several $100 after 2 weeks. And then at that point, I'm taking care of myself. I'm living in a 1-bedroom, like almost like crack house to a certain extent. There's one shower, and you don't want to hear the things that I heard at night. But you just kind of find a way to survive. And I never wanted to give in to that plight, because I always felt like when I become a father, when I have a family, I want to provide a way of life that my children never had to experience what I'm going through. But I think the ultimate culmination when I got in the Marine Corps is when my mother passed away. My mother was diagnosed with cervical cancer right as I went into boot camp. And I got the call. I'll never forget it. They pulled me in. I'll tell you a story about recruit Snowbro in boot camp. But they called me in and said, Jeremy, your mother's been diagnosed with cervical cancer. They're about to perform a procedure on her. They remove the cancer, but then they also give her a hysterectomy.
Okay.
And so they said, it's up to you. You want to go back home, or do you want to finish boot camp? And I said, I know my mother will want me to finish boot camp. And so not long after that, she ended up succumbing to the surgery. And a very difficult moment's always ingrained in my head is me at her funeral, just me and my Marine Corps blues in her casket. None of my mother's family, nobody was there. It's just me and her. And that moment made me think of how I never wanted to be in the same situation, be in a casket with just a child of mine being there for me. I wanted to change the narrative. I wanted to make my mother proud. And so from there, I just got hungry. And I got a GED now. Okay, what do I need to do to get to law school? And the law school inspiration came from my grandfather, a story that I heard. But that's kind of the pathway. It really was what the motivation was. I never wanted to give in to I've got 2 strikes against me. I mean, but if we're being honest, Nick, I also have white privilege. I also have the advantage of being someone white who nobody knows my background. Nobody knows until I start speaking, of course, until they see the gold teeth, of course. But then even that changed at one point. I took the gold teeth out and said, all right, I'm committed to change so that I can be a productive person and create a family and get married and not be in the same situation and not allow my legacy to stop here.
This is what I want to inspire people with, and that's the whole goal of this podcast, to explain to people like there's not one way to that path. And I think a lot of people who are successful, and I've been on this podcast several times, don't realize how exceptional that moment is, because I think the vast majority of people in that moment, I think the reason the concept of white privilege is so insulting to many underprivileged white people is that, well, if I've got so much privilege, why is my life so hard?
Yeah. And
so you're sitting there at the funeral of your mother, with all these issues that you've had to overcome. The concept of white privilege to a lot of people will be insulting to them. Well, if I got so much privilege, why is my life so damn hard?
Yeah.
So how do you think
I
you
welcome
took
that challenge?
Yeah.
I welcome that challenge.
Yeah.
I think the reality is, and listen, by no means do I intend to make this about race, but I think it's important to also understand that if I were someone else, would I have been given the chances that I've been given in the Marine Corps? So my pathway in the Marine Corps was meritoriously promoted in boot camp, meritoriously promoted in Marine Corps combat training, and then I applied for the officer program with tattoos and gold teeth.
And felony.
And felonies, right? And so while I don't focus on it, I know that it's a reality of the pathway. I don't give it a lot of energy because I still had to put the work in.
Correct.
I still had to be dedicated to it. So I welcome the challenge, and I also empathize with it. And the reality is that for anyone who says that it's not real because they had to put the work in, is still probably blind to the fact that all of the things that they may have been given a chance where their counterparts who were of a different shade and race may not have been given the same chance. And so I'm not saying that that was the catalyst, but I'm also not ignorant to the fact that it may have been.
Right.
So,
and that's what I really want to impress upon people is that as a sociology major, as a person who understands these difficulties and growing up in a predominantly Black school as well, I understood those differences and they were very real to me. But I think the difference is you can acknowledge those issues. Yeah. You can acknowledge they exist, but not just wear that as an albatross and say, well, I guess the system's rigged. I'll stay here. I'll rot.
Because that's the woe is me, right?
Right.
Like that, then you feel like you never advance. Well, who's in charge of your life?
Right.
You.
Odds are stacked against you. Oh, well.
Find a way to get it done.
You don't get to wait for the next one.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you can't stand there and wait for a handout either. You got to put the work in.
Correct.
So the people that say that, I empathize with them. I also understand there are no exact same situations. And so each person's background is going to be different. Each person's will or motivation to change is going to be different. But I agree with you. There are a lot of variables that come into becoming successful and all the things that you have to overcome. And so for anybody who just says, oh, I did X, Y, and Z, they're discrediting the people who really put the hard work in, who really put the blood, sweat, and tears, who went through trauma in their life and had, a lot of mental health issues. I look back at how was I able to make it? I wasn't supposed to be here with all the things I went through in my life. But for being mentally tough and navigating that pathway, I wouldn't be where I am today, but it definitely wasn't from a 1, 2, 3 process.
There's these odd moments in my life, and I'm sure you have it as well. Well, people will just assume that you've been this way forever. Where you are, the stats, right? What do you know? And that's why I love telling these stories, is that it's easy to dismiss people that are already at a certain stage because it's always been that way. Like, you must have been, who handed you that? But, that's just not how it is. And I want to inspire our viewers is that you may be going through something similar to this. You may have had these difficulties. You may have suffered these issues in the past, but perseverance is more important than talent. And as long as you're willing to push through that, it can change everything. So what made you transition? So now you've gone through these difficulties. Why law? And then why criminal defense? That's where you.
Yep, great point. Or great question. I think so. While I was in the Marine Corps, after my mother passed, I said, all right, I'm going to get my degree. And I met an old lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps who first was enlisted, then became a warrant officer, and then became a full major, and then promoted to lieutenant colonel. And he'd been in the Marine Corps almost 30 years, and he said, Jeremy, I see you're doing your college homework during lunch, and I always see that you have aspirations for more. Why don't you apply for the officer program? I did. I was one of 100 plus corporals at the time, which is not a very strong rank. It's a lower rank. Yeah, and so the program, they only selected, I think, 60, maybe not even that, maybe 30 or 40, and I was one of those out of the hundreds of corporals that applied. But went to Auburn, got my degree. I'd already had 2 years of undergrad or 2 years of a junior college under my belt, and I just was ready. I think the one thing about people who come from a difficult background is once you taste that first bit of success, it just becomes infectious. It's like working out. It's like, oh, wow, I can see a new muscle. Oh, man, if I'm consistent and disciplined in what I do, that small level of success that I obtain, it becomes like a new euphoria. So once I got my degree from Auburn, I was just like, hey, sky's the limit. If I can get here from where I was, you know what? Then I want to do what my grandfather always talked about. It's the only role model I've ever had in my life, and he passed away when I was 4 or 5. I don't remember the age specifically, but I remember my mother telling me a story about how my grandfather was a carpet cleaning salesman for all the major hotels. And he said, if I hadn't ended up in sales, I wanted to go to law school. And so when my mother told me that, something just kind of stayed in my brain. That aligned with watching Matlock as a kid. Fell in love with Matlock. Just loved his way of uncovering things. He had a unique way of reading body language and a high level of discernment. And so from there, I just said, you know what, I'm going to go to law school. What's the pathway? And so my checklist was, when I speak to people about how I overcame the odds, I said, I said, this is where I want to be. And I planned backwards. And I put that piece of paper somewhere that I would see it every day, put it on my refrigerator, and said, these are the steps that I've got to accomplish. And as I accomplish each one, I celebrate. So having a GED and needing to graduate from college. And then once I graduate from college, hey, I've got to take the LSAT. I've got to get into a law school, and then I have to graduate. Then from there, I've got to pass the bar exam. And then from there, I have to figure out what I want to do with my life. Because as you know, we don't get any specialized training in law school. I mean, we could take an extra class or two.
I mean, I hit every nightmare possible. I mean, it was every recession. I bought a house right before the collapse. Like, it was like, I was like, this is terrible, you know? And then I graduated law school, and, you know, at the end of '08, then the financial crisis. It was just like, this is a nightmare. And the lie that we're told, you know, as somebody who doesn't come from I'm first generation everything, first generation, you know, undergrad and law school, is they just told you, go to school. Well, what do I study? I don't know. Where do I go? I don't know. How do I get paid for it? I don't know. Okay, thanks, Mom. And then you do the things that everyone tells you to do, and it's not working. There's no jobs. No one's paying.
And then meanwhile, you got this huge student loan debt because we went to a private law school that, oh, by the way, probably was $200,000 plus, at least for the 4 years I was there. Correct. I know you got out pretty quick, but so to your point, there's not much financial literacy that we grow up with, and we're only told just get a degree and find a decent job.
Work for somebody.
Yeah, work for somebody. You find a way to make six figures, as if that was the end all be all goal. But got into John Marshall. I mean, of course, I was still in the Marine Corps. I was navigating that. After Iraq, I was deployed to Iraq as a first lieutenant in the Marine Corps with a helicopter squadron. I was an aircraft maintenance officer. My enlisted side, I tried to enlist for legal admin, which is essentially a paralegal. Then I got my second choice, which happens a lot back then in the military. You get three choices, and they promise to give you something, but they never promise to give you the first one.
Right.
Unless you're like top of your high school class and you graduate with honors, then there's only one or two spots. Anyway, fast forward, I ended up with aircraft maintenance officer because I did an iteration of that as an enlisted Marine, and just made it easier. Went to Iraq, did all that stuff, shot at by RPGs, all of the fun stuff as a Marine, then living with a blow dryer in your face all day, every day in the 130, 140 degree temperatures. Came to Atlanta as kind of a payback tour directly from Iraq. And then I said, you know what? Now's the time. I'm going to apply to go to law school. I bombed the first LSAT that I took. Bombed it.
So did I.
And then, you know, they said, oh, we'll take the average of the two. Took that, did well, took a Kaplan course, and of course increased my score phenomenally. Backstory is, I studied for the LSAT while I was in Haiti in 2014 because they overthrew the president at the time, and we self-deployed out there, and I brought this little LSAT study book, and I was like, I'll be ready. I got this. I'm smart.
Absolutely.
Nothing to do with being smart at the time. It's really more tactics and procedures. And so anyway, got into John Marshall, fell in love with the discipline side of it, but I absolutely sucked at legal writing. I sucked.
I did initially,
I was horrible.
The first semester.
Man, I pounded my head against the wall. I remember meeting with Professor Pender. Shout out to Professor Pender. Thank you for committing to me, because I may not have made it out of law school. She, many nights, walked me through it. And, you know, there's this thing we call muscle memory in the Marine Corps. The more you do something, the more it becomes
reflexive.
Yeah, automatic reflex. So, graduated from John Marshall in 2010.
Got out. That's
got out. This is true.
You know this language.
Got out.
You survived in many ways.
I survived.
Of warfare.
Yeah, because, you know, how many people did we start with when we first went in?
I hated law school.
And how many did we end with, our class?
Yeah.
Our class dwindled down. I think I started 60 or 70 and graduated with maybe 35 or 40.
Yeah. I remember some of my first year, he was very smart, and he dropped out at the end of the first semester. I was like, how dare you? Like, what an idiot. Yeah. And now I'm like, you know what? Good for him. You know what I mean? Like, he figured it out quickly.
Yeah.
You know?
He realized that wasn't his pathway.
Right, good for him.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was making 60-year bartending, no student debt, and I get out of law school, top of my class, I'm making 38 with $250,000 in debt. I was like, you know what? He might have made a good decision, you know?
Yeah.
I felt like law school ruined my life for a little while.
Mm.
You know?
I resonate with that a little bit. I tell you, my disappointment came with the people who graduated with me, but that never did anything with the degree. You went 4 years. Sorry, that's the other thing. I went to the part-time class at night, Monday, Wednesdays, and Friday nights from 6 to 9 p.m. for 4 years.
Yeah, you and I did the complete opposite. I did it in 2.5 years. I did the summer program. I did full-time. Like, I wanted out.
Sorry, not 2015. I self-deployed to Haiti in 2004.
Right.
And then I went to law school 2006 to 2010. But graduated from law school 2010. Went through some challenges with the divorce and getting accepted for the fitness so that we could sit. So not only do we have to graduate from law school, but before we can take the bar exam, they have to go through our life, poke, prod, financial background. You can't so much as have a speeding ticket in order to sit for the bar exam. It's pretty intensive for some.
And that's after you've paid and done all the work. Now that
right.
you do this,
now that we've spent
$250,000,
$250,000, right? Agreed. Why don't you make that a part of getting into law school,
right,
so that you don't leave people sitting with a Juris Doctorate who can't now sit for the bar?
Yep.
But anyway, finally got accepted to sit for the bar exam. Took the bar, passed it by 1 point, 271 out of 270.
Did, baby.
But you know, I always said, Nick, I didn't care about the prestigious law firms. I didn't care about the silver spoon guys who all they cared about was working for the bigger name buildings, firms who have a prestigious lineage. But all I cared about was get me in the door. Let me show my real life experience. Let me help take care of people. And that will be profound. That will allow me to be successful because my relationships is really what has landed me where I am today.
There's two concepts I want to touch on that, and that's something that I see a lot. I don't know if you see people who are like immensely talented athletes,
sure,
or people who've never had anything, and so they hit this, they finally get an NFL contract or an NBA contract or whatever it is, and then they're there. The average person in the NFL only makes 2.5 years, and so they make blank $1 million, and then you know the statistic, vast majority of them end up without any of it, and so it's because it's that just that raw talent with no discipline, no training. They're just incredibly great at what they do. And so how do you, as someone who is clearly smarter than most, when surrounded by all those different things, how do you build that perseverance and dedication? Because that's what makes things last, in my experience. It's not that you're great at something for a couple minutes. You know, it's that you are able to show up every day, consistently do it, preserve your future, you know, invest how you're supposed to, and dedicate to build something instead of just doing something for once, burning it all out, and now you're back where you started.
Great point. This message should hit home for a lot of people because there are overnight successful people, or overnight rich people is the better word, that have no financial literacy. I was one of them. I had no clue. In fact, you know, much like you, you know, I've been through bankruptcy and went through difficult times where, you know, I bought a house with a stupid, crazy interest rate and couldn't pay the mortgage to save my life while I was transitioning in law school and getting out of the military, and went through bankruptcy and had to make some difficult choices because I didn't know how to balance my finances with my real life.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that I went through that moment before finding success with the law firm and building up my network. But to your point, anything that you put the consistency in and you look at the long-term process, like I was committed to a long-term process, not a short-term process. And I think sometimes people forget that everything could be taken away tomorrow. Heaven forbid you or I get fatally ill. How are we going to provide for our family? What are we left behind? Mm-hmm. Well, that's what I think about now. And that's how I also approach my law firm and my business. So my business mindset is to continue to pour into me and my team. And then my hope is that we'll get an ROI, a return on our investment, that will be successful in the long term. Short-term gains are great, but what are you going to do with them? And the part that you mentioned about being consistent and doing things to preserve the long-term gain, you have to constantly reinvent yourself. So that's the part for me long-term, that every year I take a moment, and it's typically November, December timeframe. You know, a lot of people probably do like a recap of the year. I'm doing more of, what did I do good at? What did I do horrible at? What can I do better at? But also, what am I not doing? Where am I able to be self-reflective on the next year? Not that I'm just going to do better at, that I'm going to start anew. Maybe there are things that I'm not doing I need to incorporate.
Well, there are, guaranteed.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and the reality is, the biggest part of complacency is your inability to accept change and adapt to change. And I think that that's where my success is that I think I have related to my team and any of my close friends, and Tawana will tell you that I am the best with constructive criticism. I may not hear it right the first time, but I will validate and acknowledge that I've heard it. I think the thing that people could do better at is, instead of being defensive when people come to you with constructive criticism, no matter how the delivery is, right? Because if I said, Nick, you are the biggest blah, 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 you're immediately probably going to go into defense mode, and you're not going to listen to process. You're going to listen to respond, right. Or you may immediately respond. Right. I tend to take those moments and think about what in that statement is actually true that I can be better at. And we're all not perfect. I don't definitely am not perfect. But I think my ability to accept constructive criticism and to use the hate that some people may have for me, or the things that people think I won't be good at, as motivation. And I find a way to be better, and I challenge myself every year to be better. So that's my long-term success.
I've discovered, and one of my beliefs is that when people get successful, especially leaders, and eventually you're forced to be a leader if you want to get to a certain level, is that you start assuming that you got here solely based on your talents, solely based on how brilliant you are. And so once you begin to build that team that's necessary for that next step, a lot of my peers have made the mistake of surrounding themselves with sycophants, people who kiss asses. And so they want people just to tell them what they want to hear. Sure. And then that, of course, causes them to never grow, never get any better.
What value is that adding?
Right. And so you're essentially, what I say is, you're surrounding yourself with a bunch of bad yous. And so,
that's a great point.
Right. And so the thing that I dedicate myself to, and I have a board of directors for this purpose, is that I want every single person in the room to be better at something than I am, if not multiple things. And if not, why are you here?
Sure.
I can do your job.
Sure.
You know, if you're just a
that's
bad
the right
bad
challenge. That is the right challenge. And you got to challenge your people. So the point you're getting to is, you have to add the people who aren't yes men, but also challenge them to be better. That's where your leadership comes.
And I need them to direct me.
Yeah.
And one of the moments that I was like, oh wow, I'm getting good at this leadership, is I would have people come to me below me and say, hey, I got this problem. I said, you can handle it.
Okay.
That's why you're here.
Okay.
Why are you coming to me?
Yeah.
You know, if there's a specific question you need leadership on, sure, but you've got the power for this. And they're like, oh, I do. Yeah. And that's how you empower those people. But that's the worry that I see, and so much, pride being surrounded by, is that they're just surrounding themselves with a bunch of weaker thems. And that requires you to go, oh, I'm not as good at this. You know, you have to have somebody come to your team who still works for you, who tells you, Nick, you screwed up. Or Nick, you're not good at this.
You got to take that constructive criticism, for sure.
And if you can't take that small level of humility, you're doomed to never grow anywhere else.
This is a major moment I think that people should hear, and this is the biggest part about leadership that I resonate with on a high level. I think I've been also good at building successful teams, because what you said is, I expect for them to handle things at their level. And if they are waiting for me to get the answer, then I've not empowered them or coached them the right way. Because the more that they can take off of my plate by not adding more time or a constructive feedback, then the faster we're getting to a more seamless process that delivers results. Because at their level, if you are the right leader, you're empowering them to make decisions, whether they make mistakes or not.
And they will.
You've got to encourage them to keep making decisions at their level, so that you can be more efficient and grow. And basic leadership 101.
Well, people see that growth is like this just basic trajectory, right? You just get better at everything, and you're just this incredible person at the end.
How many times do we fail before?
Right. But also, I get worse at certain things. So Nick now would be terrible at running his firm 5 years ago.
Yeah.
5 years ago, I had 2 lawyers and all these different things. And I was training people how to answer the phone and things like that. If I did that job now, I'd be terrible at it.
Because you're too busy managing,
right,
being an owner.
Developing a different skill set.
Yeah.
And so you only have so many talents that you can develop at a certain time. And so you have to acknowledge that and say, I'm much better at running a 55-person firm now. But I would be terrible at running an 8-person firm. I appreciate that.
Congratulations, man. You give me inspiration. I don't get a chance to say it enough, but there are very few personal injury lawyers that I look up to. And there's no ego in me to say it. Listen, I have a lot of respect for what you have done and how you've done it. And I'm proud to call you a friend and somebody I can call whenever I have questions, because the practice of law is where we lean on each other.
Practice.
And if you, right? And if you're too big in your ego, you're never going to excel. And it's people like you that I, model my law firm after, that I go in and try to create my own niche with my own, obviously, style. But to see you be successful in how you did it just gives me motivation, and it means that I can do it too.
You've given me a perfect transition.
Good.
So what I admire about you is your willingness to be you and to lean into your niche and to be yourself and be interesting and be different and exciting. So kind of walk me through how what your style's like and how you're different from other lawyers, because I'm sure many people listening in are listening in because they know who you are.
Yeah. I think I learned a long time ago, being authentically you, people are going to love you or they're going to hate you. And the reality is, as long as you're true to you and not in denial, you have to be a good person at your core. But I think who I am, which makes me different, is I greet everybody with love and respect and energy. I'm sure you would say the first time we met, it was all positive energy, because I believe you get what you put into the world. Now, have I always been positive to people? Sure, I've had my moments, but I think what makes me different is my diverse background, where God created me to have empathy beyond most people, to understand in times of grief or in times of trauma, how to motivate or even be a lending ear. I think my style also kind of speaks for itself, because you'll see me, Nick, as you said, you'll see me at the Hawks game, and I don't have to be in a tailored suit.
Nope.
I can be out looking like a rapper. I don't care what you think about me, because the reality is I worked my butt off to change the narrative. I grew up on powdered milk, powdered eggs, and canned peanut butter. I had to sleep outside while my mother turned tricks. So the way I live now is unbothered by people's opinion. And that niche, which, shout out to Rashawn Williams, who's been my mentor. He's also on Shark Tank, minority owner of the Falcons and Capital Venturists. But he said, when he was teaching me about the difference between being rich and being wealthy, he said, but don't give up your flashy side, because that's your niche. Why can't you be both flashy and wealthy? So that's what I've dedicated myself to. I know when to be very serious and very locked in and entrenched in to make sure that my team is successful. But then I also know how to just be amongst regular people and not make them feel like I'm better than they are.
And this is what I want to talk about, because I don't know if you remember being a young lawyer, but I always felt like I had to wear a certain suit and do a certain thing and always wear a tie and wear the lawyer uniform. There's a specific way to be.
Play the role.
Right. And you're serious and you do a certain thing, and that's the way things work. And as you hit a level of success and not having to pretend to be that other thing, I'll never forget my buddy Mike Goldberg. We were working on a case together. I walked into a mediation. I've got a tie on and all these different things. He's sitting here like this, just a jacket and jeans on. He's like, why are you wearing a tie?
Right. It's a mediation.
And I was like, this is a multi-million-dollar mediation. What do you mean? He goes, I only wear a tie when a judge makes me. And I was like, you know what?
Great point.
Because he doesn't have to pretend to be somebody else.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to pretend to be a good lawyer. He is a good lawyer. And so what is it about, I want to talk about it. Like you are no stranger to the spotlight. You don't shy away from, people talking about you or stuff going on or your personal life.
Yeah.
Tell us about it, man.
Great way to dump on me, Nick.
No,
Jeez. Listen,
that's a
for the
huge
record, I
compliment.
haven't been on the Shade Room in at least 7 months, okay?
Let's thank the Lord.
All right? Let's not go there. Been on the Shade Room 7 months. No, all jokes aside, I think what propelled me in the limelight, I've always been that attorney who took care of the people in the limelight, right? I never wanted, the way I was raised in New Orleans, we don't ride another man's coattail. So you're not going to see me taking pictures with celebrities. You're not going to see them on my page. Unless I really know them and I'm friends with them, you might see an occasional picture. But I've always been the kind of person who's like, I have respect for you. You're just another man. You put your pants on the same way I do, one leg at a time. But when I ended up doing this reality dating show, it put me in a limelight where people got to know more about my story. And I think people resonated with me being, the white kid who grew up in the all black community who had 2 strikes against him early on, and the style, the swag, the culture that I was raised in is who I am now. I don't, so now when people see me, of course, I'm the white guy that stands out like a sore thumb, but I'm also, dressed to impress, and I don't care what anybody thinks. I think, Nick, there's a saying that I created is the spotlight is not always on you, it's in you. So the spotlight has been in me the whole time. And when the spotlight came on me, then people were like, I knew there was something different about him. And so, I think I'm no better than anybody else. I just worked my butt off, and I'd like to think that the resilience and the perseverance that God has given me has made a way for me to be, a seed sower. So, but my ability to just be different is my comfort zone.
And I think that's powerful, and that's what I want our viewers to take away from this. The 2 things I learned from you were, 1, what's your damn excuse? From coming from where you came from, the things he just told you very, very truthfully, and I appreciate that. And 2, at a certain point, most people never find that authentic. So, I don't know if you've ever gone up against the large firm defense attorneys. Love you to death, know you well. We're trying to case against one right now, but they're the same person. It feels copy paste. It's very serious. It's to the point. It's buttoned up, and there's never the bravery to go, that's not who I am, And that's what I love about you, is that you're willing to be authentic and truthful. And I think that should inspire people, is that there's somebody out there who's like, I'd love to be a lawyer, but I don't want to be stuffy. I don't want to be boring. I don't want to sit in an office and rot away. You don't have to be.
You don't have to want to. Yeah, that's right. This, I think you'd agree, Nick. This is our career, but this doesn't mean it's our lifestyle. Far too much have we seen in the past where lawyers have to always be uptight outside of, they're always in suits outside of being at the office. No, we have lives. We want to be out with the community. We want to be out and enjoy smiling and shaking hands and kissing babies. I will roll my sleeves up and get in the trenches with anybody. And I think that's the other side about why I'm different. It's because going up against those bigger firms. Now, when I was a young attorney and I was doing family law, I went up against the name on the placard, and it came in and said, oh, I'm senior partner of the prestigious blah, blah, blah. And at the end, he had to shake my hand because I beat him in the case because I didn't see him as any different. And I don't see anybody else, I show respect, empathy, and I love the pathway. But the reality is, I'm not intimidated by much, and I think that also makes me different because, number 1, I don't care about people's opinion, but number 2, I'm only on the pathway that God created. So for me, whether I win or lose, I'm going to be humble about it. So to those people that want to become attorneys and who may think that they have to live a stuffy lifestyle, we're the new generation attorneys who, we embrace diversity. We embrace people being different. It's kind of the norm, wouldn't you say? I mean, at least for people like us who don't judge people.
You get to a certain level where you just have to pretending, and that's nice. Yeah. At least in our line of work. Sure. Maybe not in big law and things like that.
Fair. Yeah, right.
Try different things.
Yeah.
So I always ask my guests as a final question. I think it's an incredibly important question, and I think it's a reflexive. And another reason why not all people who are successful want the same thing. So for you, you've done a lot, and you've still got a lot to do. But what is success for you in the end? When you're 80 and you're looking back and you're going, I did it right. I'm ready to lay the sword down. I'm proud of what I accomplished. What does success look like for you when it's all said and done?
Yeah, that is a very subjective term, but I think I'll go deep here is when my children are able to smile at me and feel comfortable, and I can tuck them in bed every night knowing that they don't have to worry about anything, knowing that their father is there, knowing that their future is protected by the hard work that I put in. I think success for me also is that I made my mother proud, and she's been dead since I was 19, but I feel it. I feel the spirit. I feel that success for me will be that I left a legacy that people can look back and say, he made a way out of nothing, and that way now is the standard. That's success for me.
As somebody who lost his father about 16 months ago, I've had 3 dreams about him in the last month.
Brother.
I appreciate that. And it's weird how that sticks with you,
Even as an adult, grown man.
Oh yeah. He was working in gas stations in his late 60s. Like, he died with $108 in his bank account. It's those moments push you, and they forever, no matter what it is. So I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So as always, please like and subscribe. We have new podcasts out every 3rd Monday of the month. We look forward to having you back and listen again soon.
If you get hit by a truck or a car, call JR.
Damn right. Thank you for joining us on Innovators and Litigators.
God. Thank you, man.